Good day, ladies and gentlemen. A warm welcome to another technical summary video presented by me, Letty Janse van Vuren. Our topic for today's technical summary video is a technology-focused frequently asked questions document that was issued by the IAASB in Feb 2023. It does constitute support material, although non-authoritative, because remember, the only authority that we have to follow are the ISAs. But it relates to technologies and the frequently asked questions when you are busy investigating exceptions and the relevance of performance materiality when you are using ATTs, which is automated tools and techniques. So really what we are looking at, the contents of the document or the contents of our TSV today. We're going to start off by looking at why is this important. Quick introduction. We're going to look at the contents of the publication, and as you can see, I've given you a screenshot of the front page of the document there, and then I'll do a quick conclusion. Right. So even though there aren't many Q&As included in here, they are done well in detail. Right. So if we can have a look at the abbreviations that we'll be looking at today, IAASB, that's the International Auditing and Assurance Standards Board, the ones that are responsible for all the ISAs. Frequently asked questions, ATTs, automated tools and techniques, which means that is any sort of data analytics that we widely use as a term. Anything that we use to analyze data. All right. Q&As we know, and then ISAs are the international standards on auditing. So I found this handy little document, and why is this important to us? Yes, we have got to be up to date and aware of all the publications that are issued by the regulators, the standard setting bodies, and one of them is the IAASB. Right, we merely only adopt the ISAs in South Africa, but they are the ones that have the authority to issue them. Why is this important? When we are using ATTs, which is automated tools and techniques, as auditors, we need to consider the effect on our performance materiality when we look at this. So in other words, we can go and select a sample, for instance, that can help us with our performance of substantive procedures. We can employ Excel basically, export, let's call it a sales journal into Excel, go and sort it via, according to the auto filter in terms of amounts from large to small or small to large. Or we can go and filter and say, we want everything above our performance materiality, which we have set at, well, whatever, let's say 100,000, you've calculated it at 100,000. So you can go and select, and that way you can then help, the ATTs will help you to go and select your material sample, because your audit procedures will say select a material sample and select a random sample. And it can help you with your material sample. And if you employ the randomizer software, you can even go and draw your random sample like that as well. Not really relevant to your clients because this is a document relevant to auditors and independent reviewers and accountants, okay, but more auditors and independent reviewers because we use a lot of the automated tools and techniques. Right. As part of the introduction, this helps us to investigate the exceptions that we have found and the concept of performance materiality. When we are performing audit procedures using ATTs, how do we link that into the concept of performance materiality? It's not unique to ATTs only, but questions on the topics have become more prevalent the more that ATTs have been used by auditors. So analyzing data sets have been enabled with large volumes of information, yes. And I know that the IAASB also does refer to data analytics. Now, they've also got a full technology web page, which I found this on. And there's the link to the IAASB's website page for technology. So you're more than welcome to go and click on that link and go and have a look at the resources they have available there. All right, I'm a firm believer that we need to actually perform our procedures in the best possible way. I'm a big believer in not working harder, but working smarter. And that also means that we need to assess things properly. What is included in this publication of these, right? There's the IAASB's logo, so you'll know this is a 10-page document. It was issued by them in February, not by their staff, by themselves. And what are ATTs? That's the biggest thing that they talk about. They define it. And then they go and look at how is it used by auditors. And they then have the 3 Q&As with examples that are provided purely for illustrative purposes. Okay, but I will go, we're going to go through the ATTs and the 3 Q&As briefly. So let's go and have a look at what are ATTs? What are automated tools and techniques? Automated tools and techniques, remember it says here that we can apply that to anything during the risk assessment procedure or for further audit procedures. Also referred to, like I told you, as data analytics. Now, data analytics is not defined anywhere. It's not defined in any standard. It's not described in any standard. So therefore, the IAASB, when they talk about data analytics, they use it as a very broad term. It doesn't narrow it down. ATTs are in the same line. Anything that you can employ that is automated, and it is either used as a tool or a technique. So audit procedures can be performed using whatever tools or techniques you want. It could be manual or automated, and it often could be a combination of both, right? Sometimes you can go and sort out your items in Excel, but you still go and manually select every 10th item or whatever the case may be. You know how auditors select their samples. Practitioners can use a lot of terms to describe these tools or techniques that are automated, but for example, applying automated analytical procedures are referred to as data analytics because you are busy analyzing data. When we're talking about percentages increase and ones that increased with more than 10% or ones that increased with more than 100,000, that we would have, right? So regardless of whichever tools and techniques are used, whether you are applying manual ones, whether they are automated, whether it is computer-aided audit techniques that you're using formal CATs like in the old days, right? Whether you've got firm-designated software that helps you to audit through the software or through the computer and not just around the computer, you still, as an auditor, have got to comply with your ISAs. That has not been taken away at all. So how do auditors use ATTs? Okay, we can use it normally to perform risk assessment procedures, and when we also then design and perform further audit procedures, or when we form an overall conclusion. So it's basically at planning stage, during the audit, and at finalization. So when do we use it? Throughout the audit, in other words. Okay. But we can, at the planning stage, use ATTs to obtain an understanding of the entity's business as well as the transactions that they've got. We can go and look at the characteristics of a population, the composition of how a population is made up, or we can even go and it can help us to identify events that affects the misstatement of certain transactions or a class or anything like that. Okay. Anything that we think is an identified risk, the ATTs can help us to go and pinpoint those. Remember, as the auditor, all you need to do is to identify at the planning stage potential risk areas. Then during the audit, those potential risk areas have got to be addressed. And at the finalization stage, you've got to go and then conclude on whether or not the risks have been adequately addressed. All right. So you can go and have a look at this. You can use your ATTs to even perform further audit procedures. And this could be either as a substantive test, which means, or substantive procedures, where you can go and look for material misstatements at the assertion level. So on completeness of revenue or on occurrence of debtors, for instance. Or it could even be tests of controls, because you could evaluate the operating effectiveness of controls, whether or not they are preventing or detecting or correcting material misstatements at the assertion level. Because that's what it's all about, right? It's all about assessing the possible material misstatements, right? ISA 315, very, very important, the newly revised one there. So the purpose of the audit procedures being performed using the ATT actually affects how the results are evaluated. So it's like any audit procedure that you perform. You perform it with a specific purpose in mind, and you document what your objective is, and your results are evaluated in accordance with your procedures. And you then conclude based on your results, linking back to your objective. So the ATTs really are just a way of automating what we've done manually in the past, right? It's automated tools and techniques. That's all it is. If you've got to, at any point in time, refine the design of the ATTs, because you always have to consider whether or not you've got to go and do that, you will need to apply your understanding of the entity, the environment, anything that you can explain. If there are certain parameters that are there, you might need to go and evaluate those parameters and redefine them. Okay, if you want to identify items that warrant further investigation as exceptions, once you go and say, okay, I'm going to go and look for items between, even though my performance materiality is 100,000, at our firm, we always worry about 70% of performance materiality. So I'm going to select my material sample as the items above 100,000. And then I'm going to look at the band between 70 and 100. And I'm going to do that as an individually significant sample, which is a part and parcel of your sampling methodology. So you could do that. Okay. Also, you'll need to discuss with management whether you can understand which data and potential relationships there are. How can you use data to actually go and do what you want to do quicker? Okay. ISA 520, oops, sorry, there shouldn't be a 6 there. ISA 520 is where they talk about if you want to use analytical procedures as substantive tests. They must be predictive, whether you are then extrapolating. What does it mean? Okay, it's got to be something where you can define the results and audit accordingly. Okay, your exceptions you can go and investigate. Stratification of the population, you can also do that if you've got data with certain characteristics within a sample or a population. Let's say you want to take your debtors, or let's say sales. You take your revenue. You've got all your sales above 100,000. That is that you're stratifying the population, putting it into little groups with similar characteristics, and you can use your ATTs there. Everything above 100,000. All your credit notes will be all your negative amounts, which you can have as a separate sample. Then everything with duplicate invoice numbers, you can go and check for those. You can use your ATTs to do that. You can go and if you've got debtors, you can go and assess your debtors that are exceeding the credit term period. Right. But they've got an example here. If a mid-year system change or integration resulted in issues with data quality for some months, those periods may be separated and then tested using a different approach. Remember, you've got to be able to rely on the population and the consistency of your controls and your systems during that period. If not, it's no good just selecting a sample, because the sample has got to be representative of the population. All right. So really redefining, stratifying your ATTs can really come in very handy there. The 3 questions that they look at here, number 1 is, when performing further audit procedures using ATT, is the auditor required to further investigate all exceptions identified, or are there circumstances when it may be appropriate to only investigate a selection of the exceptions? And it depends, right? It depends. Is this a control deviation or is this a misstatement? There's a very handy diagram on page 4 of the document, and then there are 7 explanatory notes. So please go and have a look at that one. When using ATT in performing risk assessment procedures or when forming an overall conclusion, right? Is the auditor required to further investigate all unusual items? Well, yes, basically. Because your unusual items, you'll need to go and see how big it is. And if the unusual items, you've stratified them and it's too many, and you then want to select a sample of a sample, it becomes difficult, all right? So try not to do a sample of a sample, but you can do it still. You can perform it as risk assessment procedures. The last one asks, does the concept of performance materiality still apply when an auditor performs an audit procedure using an ATT on an entire population? And the answer is yes. Your performance materiality will always still apply. All right. So your source document, there's the link to the source document that you can find. Follow that link there. In summary, your ATTs can be performed at almost all stages of the audit during planning, right, obtaining knowledge of the entity and your potential risk areas, substantive procedures, test of control to obtain audit evidence there, finalization to go and check now and confirm whether the financials are consistent with your understanding of the entity. Always apply the concept of performance materiality and remember that compliance with the relevant ISAs are crucial. If you find you still need more detail, there's my knowledge is power slide. You can go and check out the other avenues for you to obtain further information. From me then, thank you ladies and gentlemen. I trust that you learned a good deal on today's topic of automated techniques and tools. Thank you ladies and gentlemen, and goodbye.